Now, I have a gambling addiction, specifically playing Balatro, so decided to do the best thing, and that is to make my own gambling game to cure my addiction. Smart idea, I know. Now, there are a bunch of gambling games out there, so what makes mine so different from the rest? It's an inventory management game with a bit of analog horror. I've been getting to the VHS scene recently, investing my time into tapes such as the Walton Files and the Boyd one. And it got me thinking, there hasn't been any type of gambling horror game that resembles Balatro in a sense, and none of them have a definitive inventory mechanic like in other games such as Alka Mortis. With this being in mind, I decided to work on the main mechanics now and the aesthetic later to keep a nice workflow for myself. For the main mechanics of this game, I primarily worked on the dice and inventory system. There are two main areas on your board, the play area and the inventory area, which both share mechanics like destroying and transferring dice between the two sections. The inventory mechanic is like you have as much dice as you do empty space in your inventory. I decided to use the factory and facade pattern to keep the dice manager functions and the dice builder script to make the dice as I see fit. The dice objects use their own dice data as the base, then we can just edit the dice based on some random variables. This allows me to make random dice like we have random effects on playing cards in Balatro. I also made a bunch of other mechanics like hovering over dice and selecting dice. I also made a bunch of filler code in the dice manager and player board manager, which would be important for the dice effects. Now for the best part of this whole project so far, the dice effects. At the time of me recording this video, I've created over 60 different dice effects, ranging from something like Chain, where every cardinal neighbor that shares at least one matching dice effect has its total value doubled, to Echo, which adds this dice's total value as a flat bonus to all 8 neighboring dice. All these effects were made possible by the player board grid system that have been implemented in the game. The board represented as a grid using a 2D array, and is just as utilized a code that I needed to make me able to get some data from the board. For example, if I wanted to get a neighbor dice or check if a certain dice slot is occupied. I'm also able to get the dice in patterns and the dice in the same row or column. This system is especially good for when I want to add the entity system. Remember, this is going to have an analog horror aesthetic to it soon, so instead of making jokers, I decided to make entity concepts that I'm going to use in future devlogs for this prototype. The last thing I want to talk about this devlog is just the round system and the shop system. The shop system isn't anything too out there. It's just a basic shop where you can buy dice and consumables. I decided to take my own twist on the tarot, spectral, and planet cards. Instead, we have VHS tapes which can modify the tags in a dice. Tags are just what the type of die is. For example, we have a die that has the standard tag but also the score tag and many much more. For the other type of consumable, we have potions, which enchants the slot with a dice effect, allowing for more clever build making. And for the last consumable, we have trinkets. Trinkets temporarily boost a dice's stats for the current roll, giving players more flexibility and room for clever plays. For the round system, it was very easy. All I had to do was check if the played amount was above the target score and just let the player choose a reward at the end. For how the dice are played, the dice trigger from the biggest value to the lowest value, meaning like I have the same exact setup but come out with 2 completely different results. This keeps the gambling side of things more potent, which is a very good thing in my opinion. So overall, that's where the game is at right now. I've got a really solid foundation with the dice systems, the inventory mechanics, and a ton of effects that already make each run feel different. It's still pretty early on, but the core loop is there, and more importantly, it's actually fun to mess around with. The next step for me is really leaning to the analog horror side of things, adding those entity mechanics, visuals, and audio to give the game more of its identity. Because right now it plays well, but very soon it's going to feel very different, and that's what I'm aiming for. So if you're into weird experimental games, gambling mechanics, or you just want to see how this project turns out, make sure to stick around. I'm going to be posting more devlogs as I keep building this out. And if you got any ideas for dice effects, entities, or just anything you want to see in this game, drop it in the comments. I actually read all of them. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Dev out.